Transformers 1 is a movie I think all fans of the franchise have been waiting for. Finally, a theatrically released story about the origins of the Autobots, the relationship between Megatron and Prime, and finally, no humans. With one of the best voice performances of the decade, an electric third act, and a roaring applause at the end of my screening, Transformers 1 really did surprise the hell out of me. I never really grew up with Transformers, recently watched them all for the very first time, and one of the biggest questions was what was the origin of these Autobots, and I wanted to see them from the perspective of the Autobots, not the humans. Not only do I think this movie answers those questions perfectly, but it also builds a brand new world for younger fans to kind of lean into as they grow up. Before we get into more of my thoughts on Transformers 1, over 98% of you guys who watch these videos aren't yet subscribed, so if you do enjoy this video and don't want to miss out on more reviews, hit that button, but don't waste any more time, let's get right into it. I want to start off with my biggest negative of this film, and that is the horrible designs. Not only do I not like the way that a lot of the character designs are, but I think the face animation is just so weird and uncanny. It does resemble some of the older animation and older toys that I've seen of Transformers, but it just looks so weird to me. And then the designs also make this look like just a bunch of action figures in a set, which might be the point and the aesthetic that they were going for, but for me personally, it kind of just took me out of this movie as a whole. I also thought the exposition dumps in this film were not that bad, but I'm also not that familiar with all of the Transformers lore. A lot of my friends that are have told me that a lot of the lore has been changed from what they know and love about Transformers things. I thought the lore itself was actually really interesting and pretty engaging. It wasn't anything amazing, but it worked. I think it sufficed this story really, really well. And I think it inherently makes Prime and Megatron super interesting characters, and their dynamic is also really, really interesting to watch unfold. My biggest problem with the overall lore in this film is the fact that Megatron's turn kind of feels a little bit too blatant, like nothing is underscoring about it. And it makes sense. I mean, kids have to understand this relationship and this dynamic, so I understand that they can't make it super nuanced and super subtle. Getting into some of the great things about this movie, I think overall the animation does work. I think some of the designs, again, are super lackluster, but I think the final act just has some absolutely absurd and gorgeous moments. The action is really, really cool, and I think it's all just aided by really great pacing in the second half of this film, but I will say the first half of this movie is where I dock the most points. Very, very just generic children's animated film, but there are other animated films that have absolute A1 pacing throughout the entirety of the film. This really isn't one of them. If you've seen the trailers, you know how absolutely horrible they've been, and basically the entire first trailer is the first half of this film. But once again, in the second half, there's a massive twist that happens. A lot of the relationship dynamics between Megatron and Prime start to unfold, and that's really where this film gets interesting. After that lackluster first half, though, the climactic moments of this film are absolute peak fiction. This is exactly what was playing out in my head when I was playing with Transformers action figures when I was little. Not only does the climax pay off the relationship between Megatron and Prime so well, but it really just makes you feel happy about the entire world that they built up. There's fist-pumping moments and super exciting and exhilarating just character dynamics that you see unfold. I think there's just core thematic problems of this movie, but just in terms of how badass it gets pretty badass. And as for the voice cast of this movie, they were all much better than I expected, with one really insane standout. You have Keegan-Michael Key, Lawrence Fishburne, John Hamm, Scarlett Johansson, Chris Hemsworth, but in my opinion, the one that triumphs them all is Brian Tyree Henry. Okay, for starters, I will say Chris Hemsworth was way better as Prime than I expected, and I'm really excited to see more of him as Prime. But Brian Tyree Henry, just the amount of emotion in his voice is some shit that's generational to voice acting, in my opinion. I think it's because you get to understand a full arc of Megatron in this film, and it's something that we've never really seen before, and especially in the older Transformers films, none of that is really gone into at all whatsoever because you're so focused on human characters. And this brotherhood and this dynamic between Chris Hemsworth and Brian Tyree Henry is absolutely palpable, and then also the turn of Megatron is super palpable, and you kind of just understand where he's coming from, even though you know he's in the wrong. Brian Tyree Henry adds this level of depth to Megatron that we've never seen before, and it's an absolute treat to see this on screen. And finally, I am really interested to see where this world goes. Super jealous of all the 10-year-olds that get to grow up with this movie and this dynamic of Megatron and Prime that I never really got when I was younger. This world is ever expanding. It's super interesting, and the way that they executed this origin movie of sorts, it really does work. Overall, I'm going to give Transformers 1 a 7 out of 10. I don't think this is anything groundbreaking or absolutely amazing, but it completely suffices as a baseline origin movie for this world. Great voice performances, some great animation, and awesome action, and the final act is absolutely fist pumping. Really enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.